The European Union has a hankering for some fresh censorship, and Elon Musk is their new target, of course. Thierry Breton, a digital commissar for the European Commission, announced the body was opening formal infringement proceedings into Musk over his supposed failure to counter illegal content and misinformation online. Breton has made statements in the past pushing for greater EU control over tech companies. Here he is last October.
Not just because we want, to make sure that with this new regulation, and you're right, we announced this morning who are the platforms which will be regulated under the DMA with their own services, 22 services. But of course, this is the first time that we are doing it. It's extremely important for these companies. They will have now 6 months to comply with our new rules, to give more freedom for end users, to make sure that you could select your own apps, that you are not a prisoner from this platform, that platforms.
As friend of the show Glenn Greenwald pointed out, Breton had been threatening to use the EU's new online censorship law against all big tech platforms, but is focusing on X due to perceived political vulnerabilities of Musk. A major part of the EU's case is that X allowed too much pro-Hamas propaganda. Greenwald added that this is how his censorship industrial regime works. They seize on every alleged crisis to justify new censorship: Russiagate, COVID, January 6th, the war in Ukraine. Ever since October 7th, they've been accusing X of allowing disinformation about Israel to attract right-wing support. So this is very disturbing, although not surprising at all. The EU and Thierry Breton in particular and other figures have been complaining about there being too much of a free flow of information on social media forever. It is no accident that Europe has no technology, social media industry, that these are all American companies, because regulation has made it too unfriendly to do business there. We are, despite a lot of issues, we have much more robust free speech protections via the First Amendment in the U.S. In the European Union, they have nothing of that kind. And so Elon Musk and his company and other social media companies can be investigated and even punished for allowing what they deem misinformation. And it's clear they're talking about purely political speech about what's going on in Israel, for instance. They've said the same things about COVID and election integrity and Russia in the past. But what they're really talking about is political speech that they don't like for whatever reason. And Elon Musk believes this should be a platform for free exchange of ideas. I don't think the policies have always upheld that ideal, but it is totally at odds with what the European Union thinks, which is that bureaucrats, international bureaucrats, should be in charge of deciding what you get to say and think.
Yeah, Europe more generally, and then just the international community repeatedly disturbed me with their position on speech. I mean, just recently, when there were those protests in Dublin in response to a terror attack, a knife attack, those citizens were immediately cracked down on due to their hate speech laws. And then they're also proposing new laws in Ireland that would go even a step further, that would actually criminalize people for even possessing memes, for example, that would be deemed to be hateful. So you couldn't even share memes back and forth with your friends, or you could potentially be prosecuted by the Irish government. I remember that the German government was behind funding this online disinformation project that helped to unmask or dox the Libs of TikTok Twitter account. It was their research that led Taylor Lorenz from, I believe she was at the New York Times or the Washington Post at the time, going to Libs of TikTok's family members' homes and trying to expose them for their so-called hateful speech. And now we have them going after Twitter, the EU going after Twitter. It seems, unfortunately, a pattern in that area of the world, and not one that we're getting away from anytime soon. It is fascinating, too, to see just how much Elon Musk in particular has come under fire for supposed speech hate speech violations since taking over X/Twitter. He's been very vocal about wanting this to be more of a free speech platform and has been taking blow after blow for his efforts, and to his credit has so far refused to back down.
Yeah, it's incredible to me that, the European culture and their regulators are like frankly, they're like 60 years behind us in terms of how they're thinking about speech works, right? Like the U.S. went through we had the First Amendment to begin with, but then it had to be litigated a bunch of times to establish that, no, you actually can't stop people from passing out like anti-war pamphlets. You can't stop the Nazis from marching in a Jewish town, and you can't, all these examples of hateful speech. We've settled that, nope, you get to do that. We have a very First Amendment protective Supreme Court now, and we still, fight over something, like we're working out right now in the courts, whether the Biden administration went too far when they told, social media companies, that they suggested to social media companies that they take down certain COVID-related speech. I'm hoping and expecting we get a Supreme Court ruling that prevents some of that in the future. But they're still doing, over in Europe, they're still doing the oh yeah, there's too much, there's a conversation happening we don't like. Let's criminalize memes. Let's criminalize jokes. Hate speech is scary and we can't allow it, even though there's no definition for what constitutes hate speech. Hateful acts are hateful speech is subjective.
Exactly.
Acts are not. Violence you can absolutely prohibit. You can prohibit, and it's a clear difference between calling for violence in a kind of abstract way as part of your ideology that we can respond to with criticism, between either engaging in violence or calling for specific violence against an individual with enough malice of forethought that it can actually be it's criminalized. These are lines we've worked through that it hasn't occurred to them yet.
Yeah, exactly. We have all of this range of definitions for things like vague threats, indirect threats, direct threats, and varying legal procedures for all of those. And I feel like it's important to also bring up this recent hit piece from Media Matters that accused Elon Musk and X of, I can't remember what content they were upset about.
Anti-Jewish content.
That's right. They were upset
content,
that corporate advertisements were supposedly showing up next to pro-Nazi or white supremacist content. And it turned out that they had basically manipulated the algorithm in such a way that they would have this 1 in a million event happen. They followed 30 hateful accounts. They then refreshed their page thousands of times until finally they were served an advertisement from one of these corporations next to the content that they had deliberately followed and only followed, and then took screenshots of it and pretended that this was a regular occurrence on X, for which they're now being sued for fraud because a bunch of these corporations pulled their advertisements from the platform. And so it's become a routine thing that these sort of censorship-minded individuals, governments, countries now are obsessed with trying to delegitimize X as a platform, because it's basically the only social media company at this point that cannot be entirely controlled by the Biden administration.
Yeah. No, you're so right to bring that up. It was a complete hoax enacted by the third-party groups that are responsible for who have appointed themselves the hate speech monitors, and they have such a bad track record with statistics. I've criticized the ADL a number of times in the past for exaggerating the hate crime reports, or finding ways to characterize the situation as always getting bad and always getting worse, which is not to say that there aren't real episodes of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic violence, hate crimes against all manners of groups. They do happen. There is hate on social media. Some of it crosses the line into content that should be taken down, that most of us believe should be taken down. Terroristic speech, or the actual organized violence happening on the platforms. Some sexual content, particularly against people's wills or with minors, should be dealt with. So it's not like there should be no moderation or no regulation whatsoever, but the regulators, it's political speech. They're targeting your political speech because they don't like the agendas of people like Elon Musk or populists or the right in general. And we see the danger of giving them this power. I mean, in Europe, they already have this power, and they should be deprived of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I just always go back to so many things during the pandemic that were called conspiracy theories and removed from platforms like X and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube that later turned out to actually be true. You
write additionally for The Spectator. I can't remember if they were on this list, but the Daily Caller was. A lot of conservative outlets. Reason, where I write for, we were on this most dangerous websites list by the Global Disinformation Index, which is a British group funded by the State Department. We're funding it. Why? To put like American taxpayers are funding a list that American media companies are being put on, accused of spreading hateful misinformation for talking about the lab leak theory. Now the Energy Department has concluded the lab leak theory is the more likely explanation for COVID's origins, but you were considered hateful by European fact checkers for daring to ask questions about that.
Isn't this why we fought the Revolutionary War? Was so that we didn't have to listen to European bureaucrats about what we are and are not allowed to say?
That's right. If they put up a monument to Thierry Breton, they'll be advocating that one being taken down. I will say that.
Good deal.
More Rising right after this.